My name is Madeline Hayes, but everyone calls me Maddie. I'm 32 years old, and I never thought I'd be telling a story about not being invited to my own brother's wedding. Tyler and I were always close growing up, which made the sting of seeing everyone's invitations on our family group chat, except mine, all the more painful. His exact words still echo in my head. Sorry, dear, this event is exclusive. But what began as heartbreaking rejection opened an unexpected door to self-discovery. Before I begin my story, drop a comment telling me where you're watching from, and hit subscribe if you're ready to hear how being excluded led me to the most important journey of my life. Tyler is 4 years older than me. We'd wake up before our parents, sneak downstairs, and Tyler would make his world-famous pancakes. They were nothing special, just the boxed mix with some chocolate chips thrown in, but the way he'd ceremoniously flip them and present them on my plate like a 5-star chef made those mornings magical. Every summer until Tyler left for college, we'd ride our bikes to Lake Morrison, about 3 miles from our suburban home in Michigan. We'd pack sandwiches, sodas, and a weathered copy of whatever fantasy novel we were reading together at the time. Tyler would read aloud while I skipped stones across the water, trying to beat his record of 7 skips. During my middle school years, when I struggled with severe anxiety and became the target of some particularly cruel girls, Tyler was my protector. That's what siblings do. We show up for each other's worst moments and celebrate the best ones. The next day, he drove me to school instead of taking the bus and walked me right to my locker. Our shared love of photography cemented our bond as teenagers. Our parents divorced when I was 14 and Tyler was 18, a messy, painful split that left both of us feeling untethered. Photography became our escape. Tyler saved up for months to buy a used DSLR camera, and we'd spend weekends exploring abandoned buildings or driving to the coast, capturing everything from rusted factory equipment to sunset reflections on Lake Michigan. See how the light hits that broken window, he'd say, adjusting my hands on the camera. Asking about my classes and sending ridiculous care packages full of instant ramen, disposable cameras, and mixtapes. Yes, actual cassette tapes. Tyler was always a bit of a nostalgic hipster. Even as we grew into adulthood, with Tyler moving to Chicago for his marketing job and me settling in Grand Rapids as a graphic designer, we maintained our connection. We'd meet halfway between our cities a few times a year, exploring small towns and taking photos that neither of us ever did anything with but treasured nonetheless. Our parents both remarried within 2 years of their divorce. Dad found Susan, a kind of somewhat passive woman who always tried too hard to be my friend rather than my stepmother. Mom married Alan, a financial advisor with a dry sense of humor who made her laugh again after years of seeing her unhappy. Throughout all these family transitions, Tyler and I remained constants for each other. No matter what, he told me at Dad and Susan's wedding, we'll always show up for each other's big moments. It's you and me, kid. That promise felt unbreakable until 3 years ago when Tyler met Jessica at a charity auction in Chicago. She was striking, tall, immaculately dressed, and clearly from money. Her family owned a chain of luxury hotels, and she worked as their brand director. From the beginning, something felt off in our interactions. She was never outright rude, but there was a coolness. Our phone calls dwindled from weekly to monthly, and when we did talk, he seemed distracted. Last year, Tyler and I took what would become our final trip together before everything changed, a weekend hiking the dunes along Lake Michigan. He seemed more like himself away from the city, away from Jessica's influence. We stayed up late around a small campfire, talking about our childhood, our parents, our dreams. I'm thinking about proposing to Jessica, he told me, poking at the embers with a stick. Are you happy? I asked. He looked startled by the question, then thoughtful. She challenges me to be better, to reach higher. Her family has connections I never imagined having access to. That's not what I asked, Ty. He smiled, but it didn't quite reach his eyes. I'm happy with the life we're building. It's different than what I imagined, but that's growing up, right? I should have pressed harder. I should have asked more questions. Instead, the invitation revelation came on an ordinary Tuesday. I was on the phone with my cousin Allison, catching up about her new job when she casually mentioned, "I'm so excited about Tyler's wedding." My aunt posting, "Just received this beautiful invitation. June is perfect for a wedding." My father writing, "Susan and I are looking forward to celebrating with you both." Even my mother, who lives in Florida now with Alan, had posted, "Just got our invitation. We've booked our flights." My hands trembled as I called Tyler. He didn't pick up. I texted, "Hey, everyone's talking about wedding invitations, but I haven't received mine. Is everything okay?" His response came 3 hours later. "Been meaning to talk to you about that. Can I call tomorrow?" His voice carrying that formal tone he used when speaking about things Jessica had decided. "We're keeping the wedding very exclusive. The venue has limited capacity." "Too limited for your only sister?" My voice cracked despite my attempt to sound casual. The pause lasted too long before Tyler sighed. "It's complicated, Maddie. Jessica feels that, well, you know how Jessica is about presentation and cohesiveness. And her family is very traditional, very proper. And I'm not proper enough for your wedding? And I need to respect her wishes. She thinks it would be better if you weren't there." "I'm sorry, dear. This event is exclusive and—" "Stop," I cut him off. "At least be honest. This isn't about venue capacity. This is about Jessica not wanting me there and you being too weak to stand up for me. That's not fair, Maddie. You've never really tried with Jessica. You always seem uncomfortable around her friends you don't fit in with." "I don't need to fit in. I'm your sister." I was shouting now, tears streaming down my face. "I've been there for every important moment of your life. I helped you move to Chicago. I stayed up all night with you when you didn't get that promotion. I drove 6 hours when you had your appendix out. I know, and I appreciate that, but my relationship with Jessica is my future. Sometimes we have to make difficult choices as adults." The conversation deteriorated from there. By the end, it was clear that not only was I not invited, but Tyler wasn't even genuinely sorry about it. He was sorry about the awkwardness. Sorry about having to have an uncomfortable conversation, but he wasn't sorry enough to change anything. Over the next few days, the full extent of the exclusion became clear. Through family conversations, I learned that distant cousins we hadn't seen in years were invited. Tyler's college roommate, who he hadn't spoken to in almost a decade, had received an invitation. Even my father's secretary had been included on the guest list because she happened to know Jessica's mother through some charity committee. Everyone but me. My attempts to understand why Jessica disliked me yielded nothing concrete. We'd never had an argument or dramatic falling out. The closest I could figure was an incident at their engagement party where I'd accidentally spilled red wine on the tablecloth, hardly a reason to ban someone from a wedding. The most painful part was my family's response. When I called my father in tears, his response was tepid at best. "I understand you're hurt, Madeline, but it is their wedding." His silence was answer enough. My stepmother Susan was even worse. "Maybe it's best to just let it go, dear. Creating drama won't help anything. You don't want to cause a rift in the family." As if I was the one causing the rift. My mother, despite being physically farthest away, was the only one who seemed genuinely upset on my behalf, but even her support had limits. "This is ridiculous, and I've told Tyler as much," she said during our weekly call. "But honey, at the end of the day, I can't miss my son's wedding. You understand that, right? I'll make sure to get plenty of photos for you." Photos. As if seeing pictures of the event I was explicitly told I wasn't good enough to attend would somehow make everything better. As the wedding date approached, I began having trouble sleeping. I'd lie awake replaying childhood memories with Tyler, wondering where we went wrong. During the day, I'd find myself staring at my phone, tempted to call him and either beg or scream. I did neither. There was a small, stubborn part of me that believed he might come to his senses, that he'd call and say there had been a terrible mistake. That call never came. The breaking point came 6 weeks before the wedding. I was mindlessly scrolling through Instagram when I saw it. A photo posted by my cousin Allison from Tyler and Jessica's engagement celebration weekend at Jessica's parents' lake house in Wisconsin. There was Tyler, arm around Jessica. surrounded by family members, my family members, all smiling in the golden hour light. The caption read, "Perfect pre-wedding celebration with the soon-to-be newlyweds. Can't wait for the big day." And cousins all chiming in about what a wonderful weekend it had been, how beautiful the couple looked, how excited everyone was for the wedding. I closed Instagram and sat in my darkened apartment, the blue light of my TV the only illumination. The thought of sitting alone in this same spot during the actual wedding weekend, knowing everyone else was celebrating together, was suddenly unbearable. "No," I said aloud to my empty living room. "I won't do that to myself." It was nearly midnight, but I opened my laptop and began searching for flights. I'd always wanted to visit Costa Rica. Its lush rainforests and beautiful beaches had been on my travel wish list for years. The fact that it was far away from Michigan and Chicago made it even more appealing. I found a reasonably priced flight, departing the day before the wedding and returning a week later. My finger hovered over the purchase button as rational thoughts tried to intervene. It was impulsive. It was expensive. It was running away. But it was also taking control of my narrative. I clicked purchase and felt an immediate wave of something like relief. Not happiness exactly, but purpose. Direction. The next morning at work, I told my colleague Samantha about my impulsive decision over coffee in the break room. "Good for you," she said, surprisingly supportive. "Why torture yourself here when you could be drinking out of a coconut on a beach? You don't think it's childish? Running away instead of facing it." Samantha stirred her coffee thoughtfully. "I think there's a difference between running away and choosing joy instead of pain. You're not invited, so what exactly would you be facing by staying here? More hurt?" She pulled out her phone and showed me photos from her own trip to Costa Rica 2 years earlier. "Stay at this hotel in Manuel Antonio if you can, family-owned, amazing food." I booked the hotel Samantha recommended and began making lists of what to pack. With each item I added swimsuit, hiking sandals, sunscreen. I felt the knot in my chest loosen slightly. I was creating something to look forward to instead of dread. I debated whether to tell Tyler about my plans. Part of me wanted to say nothing, to simply disappear. But the more mature part knew I should at least let him know I wouldn't be available during his wedding weekend, even though he hadn't invited me. I kept my message brief. "Wanted to let you know I'll be in Costa Rica during your wedding week. I've decided to take a trip I've been putting off for too long. I wish you happiness." His reply came several hours later. My father sounded relieved. "That sounds nice, Maddie. Probably better than sitting around here thinking about things." Translation. "Thank you for not making this more difficult for everyone by being visibly hurt." My mother was more direct. "I understand why you're going, but I hope someday you and Tyler can repair this. Family is family." I didn't bother pointing out that Tyler should have considered that family is family philosophy before excluding his only sister from his wedding. The morning of my departure arrived with surprising speed. I called a rideshare to take me to the Grand Rapids airport, my suitcase filled with summer clothes and my camera equipment. As we pulled away from my apartment building, I put on a playlist I'd created specifically for this trip, songs about freedom, independence, and new beginnings. At the airport, waiting at my gate, I scrolled through social media one last time before my self-imposed digital detox. There were already posts about people traveling to Chicago for the wedding. My cousin posting about her new dress. My aunt sharing her excitement about seeing everyone. I turned off my phone. When the final boarding call came for my flight, I hesitated for just a moment. Was I overreacting? Would I regret not trying harder to reconcile with Tyler before his big day? An elderly woman in line behind me must have noticed my hesitation. "First time traveling alone, dear?" she asked kindly. "Sometimes the best gifts we give ourselves are the hardest to unwrap. Have a wonderful adventure." With those unexpected words of wisdom echoing in my mind, I handed over my boarding pass and stepped through the gate, away from the hurt and toward something new. The moment I stepped off the plane in San Jose, Costa Rica, the warm Casa del Mar was exactly as she described, a family-run establishment nestled between the rainforest and the Pacific Ocean. Elena, the owner, greeted me with a warm smile and a cold glass of fresh mango juice. "You are traveling alone?" she asked as she showed me to my room. A simple but beautiful space with a balcony overlooking the ocean. "Yes, just me," I replied, realizing I hadn't actually said those words aloud until now. "Excellent," Elena said, surprising me. Solo travelers often find exactly what they need here, even if it's not what they came looking for. That evening, the hotel hosted a welcome dinner for new guests on the open-air patio. I considered skipping it. The introvert in me was tempted to order room service and hide, but I forced myself to attend. If I'd wanted to be alone and miserable, I could have stayed in Michigan. The long table was filled with travelers from around the world, a retired couple from Canada, a family from Germany, 3 friends from Australia, and several other solo travelers. Across from me sat Jasmine, a woman about my age with a bright smile and an infectious laugh. She introduced herself as a pediatric nurse from Seattle taking her first vacation in 2 years. "First time in Costa Rica?" she asked, passing me a platter of grilled fish. "First time traveling alone, actually," I admitted. "Well, you picked an amazing place to start." A waterfall hike the next day, a sunset catamaran cruise, and a night tour of the national park. Having these plans in place gave me a framework for the days ahead, something I desperately needed. That night, I sat in a hammock on my balcony, listening to the waves crash against the shore and the distant sounds of the rainforest. For the first time since discovering I wasn't invited to the wedding, I allowed myself to fully feel everything: the hurt, the anger, the confusion, the loss. Tears flowed freely as I swayed gently in the warm night air, thousands of miles from home. There was something cathartic about crying in this beautiful place, as if the setting gave me permission to release emotions I'd been trying to control. I fell asleep to the rhythm of the waves, exhausted but somehow lighter. Morning arrived with a chorus of unfamiliar bird calls and the tantalizing aroma of coffee drifting up from the hotel kitchen. I dressed quickly for the waterfall hike, eager to immerse myself in the experience rather than my thoughts. At breakfast, I joined Jasmine and 6 other travelers who would be on our tour. Our guide, Daniel, was a local man in his early 30s with an easy smile and eyes that reflected a deep knowledge of the land. As he outlined our day, I found myself actually looking forward to the adventure ahead, leaving no mental space for dwelling on Tyler's wedding or my family's disappointment. Daniel was a font of knowledge, pointing out tiny poison dart frogs, explaining which plants had medicinal properties, and sharing stories passed down from his grandfather, who had also been a guide. After 2 hours of hiking, we reached the main waterfall, a 60-foot cascade of water plunging into a clear, emerald pool. The other hikers immediately began taking photos, but I stood transfixed, simply absorbing the power and beauty before me. "It's better if you get in," Daniel said, appearing beside me. "Photos never capture how it really feels." He was right. The cool water was shocking at first, then exhilarating as I swam toward the thundering cascade. Daniel showed us a spot where we could climb up rocks alongside the waterfall and jump from about 15 feet into the deep pool below. I watched several others go before me, their joyful shouts echoing off the canyon walls. I hadn't planned to jump. It seemed reckless, dangerous even. But standing there, watching others take the leap, I was struck by a powerful metaphor for my own situation. Sometimes you have to let go and fall before you can rise. "I'll do it," I said, surprising myself and Daniel, who had noticed my hesitation. Climbing the slippery rocks was terrifying, but standing at the top was worse. The pool below seemed much farther than 15 feet. My heart pounded in my ears, nearly as loud as the rushing water. "You don't have to," Daniel called up. "No pressure." But I wanted to. I needed to. I took a deep breath and jumped. The fall lasted both forever and no time at all. The shock of the cold water enveloped me, and then I was rising to the surface, breaking through with a gasp and a surprised laugh that I couldn't contain. It was the first moment of pure, "My brother is getting married this weekend, and I wasn't invited." Instead of the awkward silence I expected, Martin nodded. "Families can be complicated. My sister and I didn't speak for 3 years after a fight about our father's care. We're only now finding our way back to each other." His honesty opened a floodgate. "Soon." Others were sharing their own stories of family complications, estrangements, disappointments, reconciliations. Jasmine revealed she hadn't spoken to her mother in 5 years due to her mother's refusal to accept Jasmine's sexuality. One of the Canadian retirees admitted he'd missed his daughter's first wedding because he disapproved of her choice, a decision he deeply regretted now. "Family expects us to show up no matter what," said Elena, who had joined our group with a bottle of local rum to share. "But sometimes the greatest act of love for them and for ourselves is to step back and let them make their choices while we make ours." As the sun set over the Pacific, painting the sky in brilliant oranges and pinks, I realized something profound. I wasn't alone in my experience of family pain. While the specifics differed, the emotions were universal. And these strangers, now rapidly becoming friends, had shown me more understanding in one evening than my own family had in the weeks leading up to my brother's wedding. Later that night, I felt a sense of peace rather than pain at the thought. I was exactly where I needed to be. 3 days into my Costa Rican adventure, the morning of Tyler's actual wedding arrived. I'd been so caught up in the beauty and activity of my trip that I'd almost forgotten the significance of the date until I saw it on my phone screen when I woke up. June 15th. The day my brother would marry Jessica without me there to witness it. I'd planned to join a group tour to a nearby biological reserve, but something in me resisted. Instead, I found myself walking alone down the beach at sunrise, camera in hand, but taking no photos. The sand was cool beneath my feet, the early morning air still and peaceful. It was the opposite of what I imagined was happening at home, the hustle of wedding preparations, family members getting dressed in their finest, the nervous energy of the big day. I walked for nearly an hour, eventually finding a secluded spot where a fallen tree created a natural bench overlooking the ocean. I sat down, intending to watch the waves and maybe meditate. Instead, without warning, all the emotions I thought I'd been processing so well crashed over me like a tidal wave. I cried, no, I sobbed with an intensity that shocked me. These weren't the quiet tears I'd shed in my hammock that first night. This was raw, ugly crying that came from somewhere deep and wounded. I cried for the little girl who had idolized her big brother. I cried for the years of shared history that couldn't be erased, but were now somehow tainted. Embarrassed to be caught in such a vulnerable state. It was Daniel, our guide from the waterfall hike. He was carrying a small cooler and wearing board shorts, clearly on his day off. Not expecting to run into a sobbing tourist. "Madeline," he said, concern evident in his voice. "Are you all right?" "I'm fine," I lied automatically, then shook my head. "Actually, no. I'm not fine. Today's my brother's wedding. The one I wasn't invited to." Instead of offering platitudes or trying to cheer me up, Daniel simply sat down on the log beside me, placing his cooler in the sand. He didn't speak for several minutes, just shared the space and the view. "My father died last year," he finally said. "My brother and I haven't spoken since the funeral. He believes I took advantage of our father's illness to get more of the inheritance." I turned to look at him, looking out at the horizon. Family can hurt us in ways that strangers never could, because we give them access to our hearts. "How do you deal with it?" I asked. "Not always well." I spotted Jasmine approaching, carrying a small bag. "There you are," she called. "I went to your room, but you weren't there. Elena said she saw you walking this way earlier." She glanced between Daniel and me, noting my red eyes. "Is everything okay?" "Today's the wedding," I explained, not needing to elaborate further since I'd already shared my story with her. "I figured," she said, sitting down on my other side. She opened her bag and pulled out a paper-wrapped package. "I brought breakfast. Elena's banana bread and some fruit. And coffee." The simple kindness of this gesture, from someone who barely knew me, brought fresh tears to my eyes. As we shared the impromptu breakfast, Jasmine told us about her own family estrangement. When I came out to my mother, she told me I was dead to her. That was 5 years ago. Every holiday, every birthday, I wait for her to call. She never does. "Do you regret telling her?" I asked. Daniel opened his cooler and pulled out 3 local beers. "It's probably too early for this, but it feels like a toast is needed." "To writing our own stories," Jasmine suggested. raising her bottle. To chosen family, I added. As the morning stretched into afternoon, our beach gathering grew. Other travelers from the hotel joined us, bringing food and drinks. Someone had a portable speaker, and music filled the air. What had begun as my lonely moment of grief had transformed into an impromptu beach party. At one point, I found myself standing at the water's edge, watching the waves roll in. I realized that at this exact moment, Tyler was probably saying his vows, promising to love Jessica forever. Daniel collected driftwood and helped people fashion small boats or rafts for their papers. As the sun began to set, marking what would be the end of the wedding ceremony back home, we gathered at the shoreline. Before we let these go, Daniel said, "Let's acknowledge the pain they represent. These hurts shaped us, but they don't define us." One by one, we released our paper vessels into the waves. I watched mine drift away. Carrying the words I'd written, I released the need for Tyler's approval. I released the hurt of being excluded. I released the version of family that no longer exists. As if the universe was providing a dramatic backdrop to our ceremony, dark clouds gathered on the horizon. By the time we made it back to the hotel, fat raindrops were beginning to fall. The thunderstorm that night was spectacular, lightning illuminating the sky over the ocean, thunder so loud it shook the windows of my room. It felt like a perfect externalization of the emotional storm I'd weathered that day. I fell asleep to the sound of rain pounding on the roof, emotionally exhausted but somehow at peace. When I woke the next morning, the storm had passed, leaving behind a freshly washed world. The sky was a brilliant blue, the air extraordinarily clear. I stepped onto my balcony and took a deep breath of the clean, rain-scented air. For the first time, I felt ready to check my phone. There were, as expected, multiple missed calls and messages from family members. My mother had sent photos from the wedding with captions like, "Wish you were here," that stung despite her good intentions. My father had left a brief voicemail. "The ceremony was beautiful. Hope you're having a good time in Costa Rica." Several cousins had texted versions of "missing you today." I set the phone down without responding. I would, eventually, but on my own terms, after completing my trip. Their messages could wait, my healing couldn't. Later that morning, as I sat in the hotel restaurant having breakfast, an elderly local woman who helped in the kitchen stopped by my table with a fresh pot of coffee. "You look different today," she observed as she refilled my cup. "Lighter." "I feel different," I admitted. "Yesterday was difficult, but necessary." She nodded wisely. "In my 76 years, I have learned this. Family is important, yes, but not at the cost of your dignity. My mother used to say, love is unconditional, but relationships have conditions. We teach people how to treat us by what we accept." Her words stayed with me as I headed out for a day of exploration. I couldn't control my brother's choices or my family's reactions, but I could control my own response. And right now, that response was to focus on the present moment rather than what I was missing back home. The days following Tyler's wedding marked a subtle but significant shift in my experience. I began to fully inhabit my Costa Rican adventure rather than using it merely as an escape. My camera, which had remained mostly untouched in the first days, became an extension of my arm as I captured not just the stunning landscapes, but the small, perfect moments, a hummingbird hovering beside a brilliant red flower, the expression of delighted terror on Jasmine's face as she spotted a snake in the rainforest canopy, the weathered hands of a local fisherman mending his nets at sunset. On our 5th day, Daniel led a small group of us on what he called the challenging trail, a strenuous hike up the mountain behind Manuel Antonio National Park. The path was steep and often unclear, requiring us to use tree roots as natural handholds in some sections. "This is insane," I gasped about halfway up, sweat pouring down my face despite the shade of the forest canopy. "Please tell me it's worth it." Daniel just smiled. "Some views you have to earn." He was right. After 3 hours of climbing, we emerged onto a clearing at the mountain's peak. The vista was breathtaking, 360 degrees of coastal perfection. To one side, the vast Pacific stretched to the horizon, its blues shifting from turquoise near the shore to deep navy in the distance. On the other side, mountains covered in emerald rainforest rolled inland, wisps of clouds clinging to their peaks. As I stood absorbing the view, Jasmine joined me. Makes our problems seem small, doesn't it? Not small, I replied after considering her words. Just properly sized. Like, my pain is real, but it's not the whole landscape. That evening, our hiking group gathered for dinner at a local restaurant perched on a cliff overlooking the ocean. The open-air setting, strung with simple white lights, created a magical atmosphere for conversation that quickly turned philosophical. I've been thinking about boundaries, I said as we shared a dessert of tres leches cake. Before this trip, I didn't really have any with my family. I just expected them to know how to treat me, and then felt hurt when they didn't meet those unspoken expectations. That's actually really common, Jasmine said. Especially with siblings. We fall into patterns established in childhood and never update them as adults. Daniel nodded in agreement. In my culture, family obligation is everything. It took me years to understand that respect must flow both ways. My brother and I, we never established adult boundaries. We were just brothers the way we had always been brothers, until suddenly that wasn't enough anymore. Do you think you'll reconcile with him? I asked. Daniel considered this, swirling the last of his wine in his glass. I hope so, but not by pretending the hurt didn't happen. Real reconciliation requires truth, and truth requires courage from both sides. These conversations continued throughout my remaining days in Costa Rica. Between adventures, snorkeling in a hidden cove, ziplining through the rainforest canopy, watching sea turtles lay eggs by moonlight, our little group of formerly strangers shared our stories and insights. We discussed family dynamics, cultural expectations, forgiveness, and self-respect with a depth and honesty I'd rarely experienced even with longtime friends. Each day, I found myself taking more photographs, my creative eye awakening after months of emotional numbness. I captured sunrises, wildlife, architectural details in the small towns we visited, and candid moments of my new friends enjoying their travels. The act of looking through my lens helped me focus on beauty and possibility rather than loss and exclusion. On our final evening in Costa Rica, the hotel hosted a farewell dinner for departing guests. Elena had decorated the patio with paper lanterns and fresh tropical flowers, creating a festive atmosphere tinged with the bittersweet knowledge that our time together was ending. After dinner, Daniel pulled me aside. I have something for you, he said, handing me a small package wrapped in a banana leaf and tied with twine. Inside was a simple necklace with a pendant made of sea glass, a smooth, frosted piece of blue-green glass that had once been broken but had been transformed by the ocean into something beautiful. My sister makes these, he explained. The glass starts as something broken, discarded. The ocean doesn't make it perfect again. You can still see the roughness around the edges, but it makes it into something new. Something that couldn't exist without first being broken. I was touched by both the gift and its symbolism. Thank you, Daniel, for this and for everything these past days. You jumped off that waterfall, he said with a smile. Everything after that was just details. Later, Jasmine and I exchanged contact information, making genuine plans to visit each other in the future. Seattle has the best coffee, she insisted. You have to come see me. My guest room has your name on it. Only if you promise to visit me in Michigan, I countered. The fall colors are spectacular, and I know all the best photography spots. It's a deal, she said, hugging me tightly. And Maddie? Your brother missed out. Not just on having you at his wedding, but on really knowing the amazing person you are. As I packed my suitcase that night, I carefully wrapped my sea glass necklace in a t-shirt for safekeeping. My phone buzzed with a notification, the first message from Tyler since his wedding, back from honeymoon. Hope your trip was good. No apology. No acknowledgement of what his exclusion had cost me. Just a casual message as if nothing significant had happened. A week ago. Not reactive emotion. The plane ride home the next day gave me time to reflect on all that had happened. I started a list in my journal of changes I wanted to implement in my life. 1. Join a local hiking group to maintain the active lifestyle I'd enjoyed in Costa Rica. 4. Start saving for my next solo adventure. 5. Consider a website to showcase my photography. 6. Practice saying no to obligations that don't serve my well-being. 7. Remember that family is important, but so is self-respect. As the plane began its descent into Grand Rapids, the hurt hadn't disappeared. That would take more time, but it no longer defined me. I was no longer just Tyler's excluded sister. I was Madeline Hayes, photographer, adventurer, and a person worthy of respect. Returning to my apartment felt strange, as if the space had shrunk in my absence. Everything was exactly as I'd left it, yet I was different. The pile of mail on my kitchen counter included a handwritten note from my neighbor who'd watered my plants. Welcome home. Your fern is thriving. Maybe it just needed some space to grow. Kind of like people sometimes. I spent that first day back doing laundry, grocery shopping, and sorting through the hundreds of photos I'd taken. I still hadn't responded to any of my family's messages, needing time to formulate responses that were true to my new boundaries but not unnecessarily hurtful. The confrontation I'd been dreading came sooner than expected. My doorbell rang that evening, and I opened it to find my father standing there, looking uncomfortable. "Hi, Dad," I said. Elegant. Jessica's family certainly knows how to put on an event. And Tyler? Was he happy? He seemed to be. Nervous, but that's normal. My father finally looked up at me. He asked about you. What did you tell him? That you were in Costa Rica, having an adventure. He hesitated. Maddie, I owe you an apology. I should have stood up for you when we learned you weren't invited. It wasn't right. His words were unexpected, and I took a moment to absorb them before responding. Thank you for saying that. It means a lot. I was trying to keep the peace, but I realize now that I was just avoiding conflict at your expense. That wasn't fair to you. We talked for nearly 2 hours that evening, having one of the most honest conversations we'd shared in years. I showed him some of my photos from Costa Rica and told him about the friends I'd made and the experiences I'd had. I also clearly explained how hurt I'd been by his initial dismissal of my feelings. I need you to be my father first, I told him. Before you're Tyler's father or Jessica's father-in-law or Susan's husband. When something involves me, I need to know you have my back. He nodded, his eyes suspiciously shiny. I can do that. I will do that. 2 days later, I met my mother and stepfather for lunch when they returned from Chicago. My mother brought a small album of wedding photos, which I appreciated more than I expected. It was strange to see images of this significant family event that had occurred without me, Tyler looking handsome in his tuxedo, my extended family dressed in their finest. The elaborate floral arrangements and towering cake that were clearly Jessica's taste, not my brother's. He missed you, my mother said, watching me flip through the photos. He wouldn't admit it. But a mother knows. There were moments when he would look around as if searching for someone, and I knew he was looking for you. That was his choice, I said, but without bitterness. He could have had me there. Yes, she agreed, surprising me. He made the wrong choice. And I should have been more supportive of you instead of trying to play both sides. A week after my return, I received a text from Tyler, back in town this weekend. Coffee? We met at a neutral location, a cafe halfway between our homes. But there was a guardedness in his expression I wasn't used to seeing. So, he began once we were seated. How was Costa Rica? Transformative, I replied honestly. It gave me perspective I needed. Maddie, about the wedding. I held up a hand. Before you say anything, I want you to know that I'm not angry anymore. I'm hurt, yes. Intimidated by you. Intimidated? By me? This was genuinely surprising. Why? You're so different from her and her friends. You have your own style, your own opinions. You don't try to fit in. I remembered those questions, basic curiosity about how their hotel chain was handling sustainability concerns, nothing confrontational or critical. That's not a reason to exclude someone from their brother's wedding, I said quietly. No, Tyler admitted, looking down at his coffee. It's not. I should have stood up to her on this. It felt easier to just go along with what she wanted. And what about what you wanted? He looked up, a flicker of the old Tyler visible in his eyes. I wanted my sister at my wedding. It was the first genuine moment of connection we'd had in months, but I knew we couldn't simply revert to our old relationship. Too much had changed. I appreciate you saying that, I said carefully. But Tyler, I need you to understand something. I value our relationship, but I won't be treated as optional in your life. If we're going to move forward, it has to be with mutual respect. Our conversation lasted nearly 3 hours, covering years of unspoken tensions and misunderstandings. Tyler admitted that his relationship with Jessica had changed him in ways he was only beginning to recognize. I shared how his choices had affected me and the insights I'd gained during my time away. I joined a local photography club and began showcasing my work at small exhibitions. I started a blog featuring my Costa Rica photos, which gained a modest but appreciative following. True to her word, Jasmine and I stayed in touch through regular video calls. She visited me that fall, and we spent a weekend capturing the brilliant autumn colors of Michigan's forests and lakeshore. I already had plane tickets to visit her in Seattle the following spring. My relationship with Tyler remained a work in progress. There were awkward family gatherings where Jessica's coolness created tension, but I no longer took it personally. I had stopped expecting approval from someone who was determined not to give it. The most meaningful change wasn't external, but internal. I no longer defined myself primarily as someone's daughter, someone's sister, someone's colleague. I was Madeline Hayes, a woman who had faced rejection and found strength in it, who had traveled alone and discovered she was never truly by herself. Watching strangers engage with images that represented my journey of healing, I touched the sea glass pendant I still wore around my neck. Like that piece of glass, I had been broken but not destroyed. The rough edges remained, testaments to what I had endured, but they were now part of something beautiful and whole in its own right. Have you ever experienced a painful exclusion that unexpectedly led to growth or self-discovery? I'd love to hear your stories in the comments below. And if you found meaning in my journey, please like this video and subscribe to hear more stories of resilience and transformation. Remember, sometimes the most beautiful paths forward are the ones we're forced to find when other doors close. Thank you for listening, and may you find strength in whatever challenges you're facing today.